You're listening to the Yoga Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Land. This podcast brings you information and resources to enhance the therapeutic effects of your practice based on a deeper understanding of anatomy, physiology, and the integration of modern science and research with traditional practices and experiences. Join me and my co-hosts Tiffany Cruikshank and Katya Bach as we dive into all things yoga, research, and wellness.
The content of this podcast is not medical advice and is not meant to replace medical care. Please consult your healthcare provider to determine what is best for your unique healthcare needs.
Hello, Amanda. Welcome to the Yoga Medicine Podcast. Thank you very much for giving us the benefit of your time today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having a chat.
Yeah, I haven't seen Rachel since we just were saying like 4.5 years. So I'm super excited to be here and just have a chat.
Yeah, and in some ways that 4.5 years feels like it's been forever, and in some ways it feels like you could kind of fold them in upon themselves, and it's only been like a minute and a half.
Yeah,
sure, there's something
crazy.
Quantum physics in there. When I got your bio, what fascinated me was the reference to travel, and this is something I didn't know about you. Your bio says that after college you spent a decade traveling the world on a boat. Tell me about that. How did that come about?
I did, yes. So I went to college and did what I thought I was supposed to do and got my first job outside of college. And, it was a professional sales setting. I was like the youngest female in the company, and it was a great salary, and it was what I should have done, and I'm doing air quotes if you're just listening. But I felt suffocated.
Yeah.
And like, certainly it's kind of like if you've read Untamed, that first chapter of like, there must be something more than this. And I finally got the guts to just quit. And I drove from Michigan to Florida, which is like about 18 hours, and just kind of started fresh. I met a lot of people that were from all over the world with accents, and, when you're young, it's fun. And why are you here? Where are you coming from? And it turned out that Fort Lauderdale, which is where I was the yachting capital of the world. And so everyone was there from boats. And that sounded really appealing to me. I kind of dove into it thinking, well, this will be like a year. And it ended up being 7.5 straight, which in between that also included a year stint in Italy, Argentina, and almost a year in Tahiti.
Wow.
Yeah, so we were on a circumnavigation vessel, never in the same place twice. We did about 30-ish countries, 6 continents. I've crossed the Atlantic, Pacific, and Mediterranean on a boat. So it definitely left an impression on me that school and a career never could.
Yeah. I mean, I think I had a much smaller version of a similar thing, and I'm obviously not as smart as you because it took me 6 years in my office job to realize, wait, what now? Like I'm working 15 hours a day. I'm exhausted. I'm not particularly happy. There's got to be more to it than this. And then I only did 3 years of traveling and skiing, but I 100% understand what you mean. It's as if the external environment is telling you what's important and everything inside you is saying, but that doesn't seem to matter. That doesn't really feel important. It doesn't feel like that sort of stuff matters. And what I love about travel is that it completely changes my perspective, gets me out of my little narrow perspective in my own small corner of the world. And it kind of smacks me in the face with things are different here. Things are different there. Maybe there's more to it than I've been seeing.
And also, like, not even, I love everything you're saying, but not even to say like things are different there. A lot of times I think what's profound is like, we're the same. Right?
No,
like,
absolutely.
Yeah, like for me, sometimes it's that sense of oneness. Like, oh, okay, like you are so far away, but we both love the same things and laugh at the same things. And like, Do you know what I mean by that?
100%. Yeah, we care about our families and we're interested in their future, and we dance and we sing and we're interested in art, and we have to have jobs that, and sometimes there's some conflict between what we love and our jobs. No, 100%. I think it's that contrast that really appeals to me between the things that look and feel so different and the things that really are essentially the same. And obviously, that's something that's powerful to a lot of people because travel is a part of the Yoga Medicine Seva Foundation, and it is your Endeavor Impact travel as well. What is it, do you think, about travel that makes people more compassionate?
I mean, I think it's what we've already touched on. For me personally, I think it's like an expansion of it allows for an expansion of space, or for you to tap into space that maybe wouldn't have been there otherwise.
Mm,
It's kind of like reading a book. Like, you can have a great imagination, but then you read a book and that imagination expands. And I feel like travel's quite the same. Um, exactly, again, what we just said, it's that sense of oneness, of
mm,
relatability to people and places that seem so foreign to us. I think is a grounding aspect of traveling. Um, while I was on a yacht and the community in which we typically were involved was very wealthy, like the elite of the world, which is, it's funny because a lot of my travel in my life has been so, such a contrast,
mm,
which, we could talk about later as we tap into India. But, I really understood my sense of, or my understanding of privilege was so much more tangible
mm.
having traveled and seen a lot. And I think that made me want to give back. It made me understand, oh, I am so just living in the every time I go to India, I'm reminded that the oxygen I have in the United States, the air outside, is a privilege because they don't even have that in India. And I think that can make us more compassionate, as it relates to just people all over the world. I love this idea that I'm sure you've heard it, like astronauts go to space and there's like this phenomenon, they look back at Earth and it gives them this, oh my God, like we are one, like it's us. And I feel like there's an aspect of travel to that as well. It's like, the planet is so beautiful and it's ours to take care of. And people are so the same, and it's our duty to give back. I think it's all of that.
No, 100%. It really does strike you, doesn't it, that it's just through pure chance I was born in this body and in this location. And it could just so have easily gone the other way. In fact, when you look at the stats, it seems like it's more likely that we would have been born in somewhere else, in another body, in another culture, in another country. And it's just pure chance that this is the place that we end up. And I think realizing that suddenly shifts your perspective from, when you're in the busyness of daily life and in all the small details. I think human tendency is to look at the next step. What haven't I got? What have they got that I'd like? What are they doing that I'm not doing? But when you break that and go somewhere that might look and feel completely different, suddenly you realize how much you have got. I remember coming back from a trip and realizing that I flushed my toilet with drinking water. And that just blew my mind. I don't even think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have to walk anywhere for it. Don't have to carry it anywhere. Don't have to filter
Yes.
it. I think so little of it that I flushed my toilet with it. That was just like, whoa, okay, that's privilege. You don't even see it as you hit the button. Mm.
It's so true. Yeah, I like that one. Yeah, just like the air, like when I realized, oh my God,
Yes.
like just walking outside where I live is a privilege. Like
I
it's
don't even
kind
have to
of,
think about breathing.
yeah, it's like a little bit, it's like a, earthquake. Like it kind of shatters you or shakes you a bit.
Mm. I wish this was a travel podcast because I feel like there'd be lots of rich opportunity for exploration. But this one's a yoga podcast, and you've got a passage on your website that really spoke to me because it was a similar experience for me when I spent a few years traveling. It says, traveling left a large impression, ultimately shaping a significant part of who I am and how I see the world. That part of my story had many moving parts, and I found my yoga practice both physical asana and the study of its roots to be my constant. So talk to me about yoga being that sort of stabilizing anchor point with all of the other stuff kind of moving around. How did your yoga practice start?
Yeah, I was introduced to yoga really early on, like probably 17, 18, and while I was still in high school. And I didn't really connect with it. I like to be physical, and so I kind of like stuck to doing it, but not in the way that I look at it now.
Mm-hmm.
Then I just I realized that as I was traveling, and while that was amazing, it was constant movement, right? Of being here and being there, and not feeling that sense of grounding, I guess, in in myself, or even if it was physical where I was at. And so then I turned back to my yoga practice a little bit more significantly, and realized no matter where I'm at, there's probably a yoga class being offered. And it was true. And I kind of realized that even though I didn't know the language, I could still go to classes and kind of like watch the teacher or the people in the room, and still do it with them and feel a sense of community, even though I wasn't like communicating with that person. And so it just started to grow from there, realizing that like not only did it feel like a constant and feel like a safe place, it was also something that brought me back to myself and almost allowed me to process what I was experiencing in the outside world. Because I mean, doing what I did is a privilege, but like being a young female traveling the world, like it, there's things happening that I think at the time you don't even know how it's affecting you, or that it will affect you. And I feel like yoga pulled me back and was like, hey, no, process what you learned today, process what you saw today,
Mm.
process how it's making you feel, process why are you here, and why are you traveling, and why don't you want to go home. And it was not only a constant, but it was like journaling and movement.
Oh, I love that. And I'm really struck by the fact that you mentioned the community aspect of it straight away, the fact that you felt kind of connected to the other people practicing, because mine was a much more solitary experience. And maybe that explains why you wound up opening studios and why I've wound up teaching mostly here in my little spare room all by myself.
Oh, that's so funny.
What took you back to the States through yoga teacher training? What was that part of the journey like?
I mean, and back to the community aspect, like, I
Hmm.
guess, like, when you're traveling too, like, you're so needy of connection because you're not
Mm,
really by family or friends, and you have your friends on the boat, but it's just kind of different.
mm,
And there was just something about walking into those yoga studios, and I still to this day feel it. Like, if I'm even just driving through a town and I see someone like with a yoga mat, and they're going to yoga, like, I just immediately feel like connection. And I feel like that was replicated in all the countries I was when I walked into a studio. So whether we were connecting through language or not, it still felt like there was some sense of we get each other. So I moved back to the States. I tried to move back to I call it moving back to land, because if you lived on boats for 7 years, that's essentially what you're doing, is moving back to land, which
mm.
is equally as difficult as moving countries. And I tried a few times. So I had a few attempts moving back to land. This year stint I did in Buenos Aires in Argentina was an attempt to come back to land that didn't stick longer than a year. Um, all for good reason and purpose now. But when I finally came back, I had come back for love, which was probably the strongest reason to come back. And I was, found myself again back in this corporate world, interviewing for jobs. And I'd interview for these jobs, and they're like, it's 8 to 6 every day, or 8 to 5, and you get a 30-minute lunch break, and you get 2 weeks vacation. And I would always be like, do you mean like a month, or, like, and they would, no, a year. And I'm like, well, how do you travel the world in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Just, and I'm joking about it, but it's so apparent to me how my world was expansive,
Mm.
and then coming back and finding that job was going to limit it.
Oh, yeah. like crush it, really. What can you do and I mean, even this conversation's privileged. I get it. A lot of people don't get any holidays at all, but in the developed world, 2 weeks a year is not much. The States is definitely an outlier in that respect.
Yeah, and even just like what it takes away from us as a culture to
Hmm.
put all this importance on working above living or working above experiencing. And like, that's depressing in and of itself, that coming back and really feeling that weight. And someone had asked me, well, what could you envision yourself doing every day? And I was like, I just want to be in yoga pants and in a yoga studio. And they're like, well, why don't you open a yoga studio? And I'm like, oh my God, all right, I'll do it. Which is kind of how I've always been in my life. And I just really dove in. I laugh looking back. I had no clue what I was doing at all on anything. And like there were even times the city would come in and, I'm still under construction and they're like, well, where's your business permit? And I'm like, oh, I didn't know I had to have one. I'll go get one today. Just learn by this trial and error of the yoga studio. But yeah, the first one in Kentucky had built such an unbelievable community. I think about it even so often, and it's a decade later too. But yeah, it allowed me to kind of combine those passions of travel and not working 9 to 5 and having more of like this expansive life and community and fostering that for other people. I really found was what was magical in that specific spot at that specific time. It was a really small town in Kentucky, and they had no other yoga studios. They hadn't even, had the opportunity to experience yoga, whether it was physical or deeper. And it was really beautiful that like this practice came into this town and took this group of women and really allowed them to see that they can be expansive in their own ways and live full lives in their own ways. And it doesn't have to look a certain way, in which was the way that they've only ever been taught or ever have seen. Now, I mean, that's how I found yoga medicine though. So while I had that studio, I felt like my 200-hour and the supplemental education I was giving myself wasn't enough. And I really felt like this pressure to be able to support people within their bodies and know what I needed to know to do that. And so that's what kind of led me to yoga medicine, is that there was a travel aspect, but there was also this like really strong anatomical pool or highlight as well. And so I just felt like the moment I saw it, I was like, yep, this is for me.
Yeah. And that's how you wound up being on the first Sabre trip to India, which sounds like another big game changer.
Yeah. So the first module I did with Tiffany in yoga medicine was in Thailand. And and that was like on a wait list. There was like 50 people on the wait list. They're like, you'll never get in. And I'm like, a week later, I got a call. They're like, you're in. I'm like, oh my God, I had to book my ticket in like a week and go. And like, it felt like very like this. And at that retreat in Thailand, she said that she's planning and launching not like a mission trip to India, but like a Seva volunteer trip to India. And I was like, oh my God, like this is why I'm here. I've been wanting to do that my whole life. And, talked to her right after that class and said like, I'm 100% in, I'll do whatever I need to do. And yeah, I ended up on the first trip to India with Tiffany in yoga medicine.
And what was that experience like? What did you learn there?
For all of the places I've been, and I say this to a lot of people, and I say it not from a place of like, oh, I've been all over, but like a place of at least like the ability to compare or something along those lines, is that India for me was just mind blowing. Like the level of poverty, just mind blowing. Like, and I have seen it everywhere, but this the extremes of pockets in India were just unreal. And I always say, like, you kind of go to India, especially on these trips, with like an idea, like, oh, I want to feel good, or I want to give back, or whatever. And then you come home with like a life's mission. It's just really impossible not to, not to. You can't bear witness to, kids on the streets or in brothels and come home and forget about it.
Yeah. So let's talk about the work for people who are listening who haven't heard of the Yoga Medicine Seva Foundation. What is it? What's the mission? What do you guys do? What problems are you tackling?
So Yoga Medicine Seva Foundation is actually a nonprofit, but it has a parent charity, a 501c3 in the US that it funds money through. All of those combined projects and mission, I like to start, like, if there were an umbrella or like a pyramid, like the top is, or an iceberg or a pyramid is a better kind of analogy, but the top, point that everyone sees and is aware of is human trafficking. We want to end human trafficking, or the exploitation of women and girls around the world. But that's unrealistic if we're being truthful. Like, it could be something we're working towards or working on, but we can't end it. So then what comes next? We look at, what causes human trafficking, and there's, it always is going to stem back to poverty. Mm-hmm. I think there's an aspect in there that stems back to, we're trying to change a deeply ingrained belief that women are less than. So, if poverty was a bigger issue, trafficking exists from demand, and the demand is created by the belief of, oh, well, women are less than, we can, use them, or children are less than, we can use them. At the end of the day, like, to simplify it, we're an anti-trafficking organization with a belief that, and I hate the word empowerment, I'm sure most of us do in this yoga world too. It's like used so often, and what does it mean and how do we get it? But like, the empowerment of women and children in these very vulnerable situations across the globe, what resource can we give them? What do they need? What can they ask for that we can supply that will give them the ability to break the cycle of poverty? And we believe that is education, whether that's remedial education. If you come to us at 8 or 12 and you left school at 5, how do we get you where you need to be? And then how do we ensure that you stay in school until grade 12? Our big thing right now is that, we're seeing this gap between grade 12 and employment, which creates a new vulnerability. So I'm saying anyone really can get you to grade 12, but then what? Yeah. And we even have a sense of this, in our Western world, of like, what do you want to be when you grow up, and you grow up at 18, you don't really know. And it's great that we have the resources we have, or the parents, or the, options. But if you don't, then you fall into this space of vulnerability, where a form of trafficking could take control. And most often it does. So how do we bridge the gap between getting you, or you getting yourself, to grade 12 and an income sustaining career or trade that can, again, break and continue to break the cycle of poverty?
I mean,
it's a really long-winded answer of what we do.
No, that's not long-winded at all, because they're such huge issues, aren't they? And what struck me at the beginning of what you were saying there was you having to hold these two realities of, these are such huge problems that we will not be able to fix them. We don't have the capacity to change human nature. And so these horrible things like poverty and inequity and trafficking will always exist. But at the same time, you have to hold the reality of, but there are things we can do. and what are the most effective things that we can do? Where can we best spend our time and our resources and our energy to do what we can? And that, gosh, to me, that sounds like that must in itself be a real emotional roller coaster of seeing things that just tear your heart out of your chest that you can't fix and you can't change, but then to turn around and go, okay, what can we do?
Yeah, it is. I just got back from India, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I was there for 2 weeks, and I don't know, it was like my seventh time going, and this is my work. So there is a level of like, I hear it all day, every day. And so there's a level of like, I don't want to say numbness, but it just becomes your reality. But and Sarah's the founder of Her Future Coalition, which is the benefiting charity of Seva. But we do this every time we come back and we think we're fine. And we just dive right back into work. And then a week into that or 2 weeks into that, we realize like, we've experienced secondary trauma and then haven't processed it. And it is a really hard transition. It's a really hard transition to be there and see those levels of poverty and the girls that are the community in which you serve, and then to come back to your world. And this is an example. I came back and Sarah was with me, and we had a meeting locally with some donors, and they send their children to private school, which is great, and it's about $30,000 a year. And it's hard because like I know that sending a girl to school in India is $360 and will change the course of her life, which will then change the course of her family's life and her community's life. And it's a hard place to be, right? To not think that we're not doing enough or we're gluttonous, because that's not really the truth either. But how to process living in both of those worlds.
It sounds a little bit like the Hurt Locker. Basically, you're coming back from one reality and you're standing in another one that doesn't feel real based on what you've just experienced. Standing in the supermarket aisles looking at 85 different types of breakfast cereal going, how is this reality? Yeah. And how do you process that? This is now a familiar thing for you. How do you create space for those feelings to come out and to find their home?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've gotten a lot better with it, even on the trips that we offer, both with Her Future and Seva, is that we did realize that it's almost like you need a halfway house on the way home, a place to pause between that world and home, to process and talk about or cry or not, whatever it is that you need at that time. So we've gotten better at giving ourselves time and space, of saying like, hey, we're going to actually take 2 weeks off of work after we come off of 2 weeks from working in India to be able to get back where we need to get back to. On the trips, when we bring groups with us, we actually started to bring therapists as well. And we have 2 clinically licensed therapists that are also yoga licensed therapists. And so for us, in this world, it gives us a really nice combination of things that we're comfortable with and ways to process it. And so those people are with us during the trip, and will offer like processing circles each evening that are optional. You can come to them or you don't have to. And then they're also there if you need to speak to them, before, during, or after the trip. And I feel like that's been really beneficial as well, because even you might not even know what you're thinking or how you're thinking it. And then that person with those resources and skills will bring it out of you, or say it in a way you're like, oh, that's what was in my head, but not what I could articulate. So yeah, we've looked, we've given ourselves grace and time to process. And then we've tried to connect with people and resources in which we can not only give ourselves, but give our community on these trips that, allow for that processing.
And I think that's so important, because for all of the talk that we see of yoga teachers helping people hold space, there's only so much space you can hold. And if you really are seeing traumatic experiences for people that it's easy to relate to, I'm a woman, you're a woman. Like I said before, without just some trick of being born in this place, in this body, I could have been born in a red light district in India, and my future and my present and my prospects would be completely different. So, and when you come to human trafficking, there's an aspect of sex trafficking to it as well, and it's not difficult as a woman to think of experiences that could have gone a lot worse than they did. So yeah, I think I'm really impressed by the fact that you have professionals there to help people create space for what they're feeling and experiencing, and start to put words around it. I think that's really important. Mm.
Thanks. Yeah, I am proud of us too. Like, I think that it's, you know, we didn't know what we didn't know, and now we know better, and we're trying to
Mm.
do better. And yeah, there is an aspect, even as a yoga teacher or as a yoga therapist, is that idea of, I am here to guide and hold space and like
Mm.
guide you to certain places. And then it would not be responsible for me to then just boop, never
Yeah.
see you again, or never,
Thanks for
not
coming.
right, not have the ability to at least then guide you and hand you resources of some sort. Like, it's
Yeah.
okay as a yoga teacher to be like, I can't process that with you. However, here's some people that can, or here's what I
Hmm.
think you should do.
Mm.
And we kind of felt like that with India too, is like, oh my, we're taking 20, 30 women with us on these trips, and they're experiencing, yeah, tons of triggering things and really traumatic, like, sights and stories. And then for us to just kind of like send you home and say, like, glad you came,
Yeah. Thanks for
where
helping.
does that, yeah, where does that responsibility lie?
Mm.
And is it even effective? Is it then effective for our long-term goals? So if I bring you and then send you home and you can't process it, and it's so intense that you're like, I just can't think about that ever again, that
Yeah.
wasn't really beneficial either, right?
Yeah.
So,
100%. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I can see how there's, and it sounds kind of indulgent, doesn't it? That there are people who are in much worse straits than we are, and yet we still have to manage our own feelings and reactions. You can't just pretend that, well, compared to what they're going through, I'm fine. Therefore, I'm fine and I don't need help. Because you're right, that doesn't get you any closer to taking action and doing something helpful about the situation. I love
yeah, and
the
I hate,
focus on. No, carry on.
well, I was just gonna say, I always like cringe when I hear that comparison of like, oh well, people have it worse, or I
Yeah.
shouldn't be while we're on the trip, I shouldn't be complaining because look at what we're seeing. And that's, we all, it's all relative. We all experience our
Mm.
own emotions, and we're meant to, right? And
Hmm.
I do believe we need to hold space for all levels of that.
Yeah, comparing suffering is never useful, is it? I use it sometimes in my own life to remind me of perspective. Like, hey, this is the worst day I've had this year. But, in the scheme of things, it's really not that bad. But it's still the worst day I've had this year. The worst day in your life is still the worst day in your life. So I think it's, again, that practice of holding two things simultaneously. Like, this is really bad, and it hurts and it sucks. It could be worse, of course, but right now it's really bad. And just creating space for both of those realities at the same time, I think, is something that yoga is good at teaching us. Like, yes, and this, and yeah, it's not always
Yes,
either or. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
I was going to move on to talk about the focus on education, because obviously in the yoga medicine community, education is something that we all really prize and value. It's something that's one of our values, or we wouldn't be involved in yoga medicine. So I love the fact that it's not just about giving money or housing, but it's about how do we give these women and children skills that then mean that this doesn't happen to their children, and they've got somewhere to go. So talk about the education piece and some of the ways that you've been able to help.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, as yoga teachers, when we get more trainings, we feel more confident, right? We walk into our classrooms and we can answer more questions, or,
Mm.
we just walk in with a sense of, again, I don't want to use the word empowerment, but yeah, like, of confidence that we know
Hmm.
what we're doing and we can help and we will help. And I think it's, it's the same in education of women and children, is that, you're deserving of this information, and this information or these resources, this education is going to make them more confident and make them value themselves more.
Mm.
And then therefore have that ability to have that confidence to say, no, this isn't for me, or I'm not going to do that, or I'm going to try for this. And I think myself, Tiffany, Yoga Medicine, Her Future, all of our partners on the ground in India, I think we all have this similar belief that education is the key to freedom in so many, however you define freedom.
Mm. Yeah, I think research 100% backs you up on that, because education has shown to have huge impact, not just on people's job prospects, but on their physical health, on their mental health, on, for women, their capacity to control how many children they have, and the economic impacts that leads to, and the health impacts that leads to. So yeah, I think it is a huge stepping stone for people just having a general sense of their own capacity and capability of not being victims to circumstance, but having some say in the choices that they have in front of them.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something yoga teaches us, and then I think even as teachers, we can witness other people learning that, or on their own path to learning it, and it really is beautiful to see. I taught yoga when I was in Kentucky at a prison, and what shocked me was women were older than me, but had been incarcerated really since like 18. And when you look back, when you're older and you look back, you're like, it's just a baby, right? You're still a baby. And how they were like sponges for the information of like feeling their own bit. Like, please tell me how to breathe. No one's ever taught me that. Please tell me how to, feel this part of my body. And it just, for me, was like, I don't know. It was just giving them those tools that they might be able to pause for a moment when something's really intense and take a breath, and it might change the outcome, right? And again, things that we think are so simple that maybe our moms taught us when we were little and they just didn't have, it can change the course of a life.
Yeah.
And I see that in India, we had offered one time, there's no access to birth control, and not even in the brothels, so you don't even really have a say. But we offered a free class on taking your temperatures, knowing when you're ovulating, and again, like you said, being able to control when and if you become a mother. And at first, no one attended it. And I think it was like maybe a little bit too progressive for the community, but a few people did. And then they went back and they started to explain it like to their communities. And the next time we offered it, like it was like packing sardines into like a big gym. Like every woman was there to try to learn this thing about our bodies that we should we should be given at birth, this information, right? This resource. And then to think about how that would affect their lives, I think is really beautiful. And so, yeah, it's about education on all fronts, right?
Yeah.
Not just
scholastic
reading and writing. Yes, but like, how does the body work, and how does your breath work, and how do you save money? What are my human rights, and how do I stick up for them? Like, there's so many aspects of education that we're trying to focus on, especially in our new center. And all of it for the same goal of giving you more confidence and more resource to find a different path.
Well, let's talk a little about the impact that you've had so far. And I'm sure sometimes it feels like a drop in the bucket compared to the size of the problem. I mean, some of the stats that the Yoga Medicine Seva page shares on Instagram just blow my mind. Like, sex trafficking makes an estimated $99 billion a year. And it's the third largest criminal industry after the illegal sale of drugs and firearms. I mean, oh my God, how is that still the case in this day and age. But yeah, let's talk about the impact that you've had so far. Are there any sort of success stories that you want to share, or any sort of stats on the things that you feel like you have actually been able to do that are positive?
Yeah, I want to go back to that statistic because I do think it's really like important, and I think people actually need to like say it out loud. So the
Yeah.
third largest industry, illegal industry after guns and drugs, is human life, right? So I don't even want to say human trafficking, I want to say human life, right?
Mm.
So it's guns, drugs, and human life. And there's more slaves today on our planet than ever before in the history of the world. The UN estimates about 40 million, which we know is a really low number. 1 in 4 are children, and 71% of the overall are women, females. And this idea that like everyone's free and slavery is over is absurd. It's not in any shape or form. But that does feel so big, right? That feels like, oh my God, I can't affect the drug industry, the gun industry, the sale of human life. Like, what could I do? And I think, it is overwhelming. And what we try to focus on, and what I would tell everyone, is that, like, yeah, you can change one life. And I don't ever think that, we can send one girl to school for a year for $360. And that one girl will gain the confidence and the empowerment in which we're talking about. And every day when she goes home, she's going to exude that confidence and empowerment to her brother, her younger brother, or her dad, or her uncle, and her neighbor. And then that's going to start this ripple effect, right? And I really, truly believe that. Sonali is a great example. Sonali and her brother, mom, and dad live in a closet in a complex, and they live there for free because they work cleaning and maintaining the complex for others. So it's not really free, actually. It is a form of servitude, because they're saying, I'll give you this place to stay. However, you have to, work 80 hours a week to have it. To gain or to get an income of any sort, the mom and Sonali would bake bread and sell it, and they'd sell it honestly for like a penny or two a loaf throughout the evening. And this family was, working around the clock just to survive. And the people in the complex were kind of like degrading to them, or like making them feel as if they were being given so much by being given this closet in which they could sleep. Sonali was chosen by Obama Foundation's Girls Opportunity Alliance to have a chat with Miss Obama. And think about that, right? Like, that kind of opportunity, even to any of us, I'm sure listening, it sounds incredible, and as if it would be a once in a lifetime opportunity. And so for Sonali, it was massive. And we helped her over the course of a few weeks improve her English and work on Zoom. I, do Zoom kind of chats with her, and just have conversational English, conversations. So she could actually chat to Miss Obama, and she did. She had about an hour chat with her. And this, while not essentially an education, maybe a resource, completely changed her family. They believed that their daughter had value, probably for the first time ever, not because they didn't believe that, but innately and within that community, it was just like a given that no one had value, right? And they decided, you know what? We don't want to live in this closet anymore. We're going to actually all go get jobs, and we're going to find our own house, and we're going to live in that house. And they did. And so this 1 hour conversation did completely shift this family. And that family is now going to start to shift the people they interact with. And I feel like I have to, and we all should, focus on those small drips into the ocean, because
Mm,
I think, my job here is, in my lifetime, is to just simply plant a seed, and I hope that people behind me water it.
mm.
Um, and to do what I can, to protect that seed. And I think all of these are examples of um, what that education does, what the impact is. But Her Future Coalition and the Yoga Medicine Seva Foundation send about 1,000 women and children to school each year. In the opening of our new center that actually just opened this month, it's where the Seva Center is. It's the largest room in the building. It's this really beautiful, large room with gorgeous lights, and it's for workshop space. And that space will offer human rights workshops, yoga workshops, female health workshops. We've already actually had in there, while it wasn't like a public offered workshop, it was kind of like us testing out the space, but a recycling workshop, how to live, green, and how to recycle, which is information and education those communities have never been given. And that will actually open it up to 1,000 more girls or women over the next course of just a year. So we're doubling our reach with this new center opening this month. And in the past, in the history of both the Medicine Seva Foundation and Her Future, we have a 100% rate of no women being re-trafficked after full graduation from our programs, which
That's
I think is
awesome.
pretty amazing.
That is
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah, that trickle effect, the kind of the ripple spreading across the pond, is the bit that you're really kind of hoping for, isn't it? You just start where you are and you do what you can, and you trust that those seeds will spread. One of the things that really stunned me was that most often women or children who are trafficked by their family. And it's really easy to get judgy about their family, isn't it? But you hear a story like that one, and maybe that's the only option the family see themselves as having. Maybe the life that they're trafficking the child into doesn't seem any worse than the one that they have right now. So it just blows my mind.
It is. So you said something though, and our mantra in Seva and Her Future is start by starting. And we're
Yeah.
constantly telling each other this, like, what should I do? And we're just like, start by
Mm-hmm.
starting. And I think, it is a good reminder. Is like, you just, I always say, share, care, and do. And do just means start something, do something, even if it's
Mm.
just calling your friend after you hear this podcast and saying, hey, look, guess what I learned today? Human trafficking is the third largest industry after drugs and guns. Like, that's doing something, and that's starting.
Mm.
Yeah. And, I guess in the States, an example that comes to mind is women or families that were coming over the border from South America or Mexico with their children, and the judgment that is placed on them not doing the process correctly by some people in the States, not everyone. And, when I heard that, I would just, say to people, what what would you do if your child's life was in jeopardy? What would you do? And, inevitably their answer is always like, anything I had to. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you do anything you have to do to save your child, right? And when we're in an indigenous slum community and you have 6 kids and you can sell one to save 5, we would probably all do it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a hard conversation to have and to hear and to think about. And like, you want to think like, oh my gosh, I would never do that, but you would, right? You
Yeah.
do absolutely desperate things when you're desperate.
Mm-hmm.
And, some of that even comes down to education. We do some social community outreach education, because we'll have the traffickers come in, and they're, really good looking, sweet women that are telling these families, like, we're just going to take your daughter over to Delhi and she's going to, clean houses and make really good income and have a place to stay. And she's going to send you money back, which is just a way to get her and sell her into some form of slavery. But the education's not even there on that level in these communities to say, hey, that might not be the truth. And like, let's look into it. And here's how we look into it. So that's another thing we're diving into is like, social education, education within these social outreach within these communities to kind of, give them the tools as well as like, hey, here's what's happening.
Yeah, that sounds it sounds overwhelming, but there are obviously positives to it too. There's no doubt that the kind of work that you do is powerful for the people that you're reaching out to, but it sounds like it changes you as well. And I found a post of yours on social media that really struck me. So I'm going to read it to you because there's nothing more uncomfortable than hearing your own words read back to you, is there? So just enjoy,
Okay.
You said, as I depart India, I leave feeling utterly blessed. You come thinking you're here to save the children, but truthfully, they end up saving you. Their giant spirits and joyous smiles encompass all that is good in the world. But as the dust settles, you quickly learn none of that matters. Today is their future. Their moment is now. And as they proudly show you their mathematics and art, sing, dance, and perform yoga, the empowerment that exudes is tangible. They are the heroes. They are the change. These little souls have shown me what life is. They've given me a deeper purpose, and they've strongly reminded me that everything we need is inside. We are one, and I'm as grateful as I've ever been to be privy to such beauty. I really love that. I know it's horrible to hear your own Instagram posts read back to you, but you think you're there to save the children, but truthfully, they end up saving you. So talk a little bit about what the kind of work that you're doing has given you.
I mean, it changes you. I think a beautiful part of being in India and walking in these communities with, like I said, the most extreme poverty you've ever seen, but like they're not depressed, right? They're living their best life, or they're trying to, and they still find joy in kicking the soccer ball around and getting a new book. And it's just such a reminder of like human resilience and, you know, finding that joy and that power within. And I guess it solidifies my passion in that, like, we never like to say we're like saving anyone because we're not. And it's the same in yoga. We're not changing someone's life as a yoga teacher, but we're walking next to someone on a path that they might not have been able to walk without us or without that space. And so the passion really is, I think, what I've uncovered is like, we all have that joy. We all have that empowerment. We all have that intelligence and that love and that ability. But sometimes it just takes someone walking next to you for you to tap into it and to feel it. And so, my passion, both as a yoga teacher and in this work, is not saving anyone, but allowing them to teach me that what I need is within, and that I can do the same for others. I can walk that path with them. Yeah, I mean, this one situation comes to mind too. We were sitting on the top. This was 2 trips ago. This was February 2020, right before COVID hit. We were sitting on the rooftop of one of our jewelry centers, and there was about 20 Western women and probably about like 40 Indian women or Nepali women, and none of us could speak the same language, but we're kind of in this awkward position of like, you guys got to get to know each other, and you're like, well, this is weird, and what are we going to talk about? And what was so significant from that moment was that like no one was talking about their trauma or their depression or what, like, one woman was like, yeah, my husband never puts his shoes in the basket by the door. They're always like laying next to the bed. And then the other woman from India is like, same. He never beats the rug, but like, I want him to beat the rug. And, it was just, we're all laughing and there's this camaraderie and, yeah, it's that reminder of like the simplicities of life and the oneness that we are. And yeah, it's all of that combined. I think that when and if it feels, like you said, overwhelming, which it absolutely is, it's those moments, right? Seeing that one child's joy or feeling that oneness with these women, that reminds you of like that might be all you're here to do is that plant that one small seed.
Yeah, I love that. Not just saying, oh, we're all one, but actually feeling it all the way down to your soul. Yeah, that's powerful stuff. So I guess the next question is for people who are listening, how can they help? If they feel inspired to do some little something, how can they help the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so share, care, and do. I think that, again, at the least, share what you've learned, what you've heard, if that's in this podcast or another, if it's just a stat you found online, do some research, share what you've learned, reshare posts, and it might feel insignificant, but it's really not. Sharing an awareness about the inequalities in life in general are really important. The more we talk about it, the more comfortable it gets, and the more resource that is put towards it, more energy that is put towards it is always going to be beneficial. So yeah, share what you've learned, what you've heard. Talk to, start at home. Talk at the dining room table, even to your kids, that this is something that exists in the world. And maybe that opens up a conversation about privilege. Maybe it opens up a conversation about something else. But all of these things kind of tie into each other. And I didn't talk about this kind of stuff when I was growing up, and it just, one person shared it with me at some point in life, and it changed the course of my life. And so, yeah, let's not underestimate the power of sharing and caring about an issue of any sort. Yoga Medicine, Seva Foundation, if you do feel connected to us, you can send a girl to school for $360 for the year or $30 a month. You can travel with us. You can find that information on yogamedicineseva.com. On our Instagram, you can email me info@yogamedicineseva.com. And, yeah, just share, care, and do. It doesn't have to be, we're not looking to end poverty or end the inequalities of females and children in this lifetime. It's impossible. So we have to give ourselves more tangible, realistic goals. And, maybe that is to speak to one person this week about it. Or next, to save enough so that next year you do send someone to school for $360. And to know that, yeah, you can plant a seed. Maybe the goal is to plant a seed and not to change the world.
I love that. I think that really strikes home because a lot of the resistance that comes up is, I can't afford, or what could I possibly do? And that reminder that even sharing information could be enough to trigger that in somebody else. It doesn't even have to be you if it's not the right place or time for you right now. That really does strike home to me that there's something that all of us could do.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's always something.
So you've given
we
some
start
links.
by starting.
Start by starting. Yeah, I love that. I think we could apply that to pretty much anything in life. And you've shared some places that people could go for more information on the Sabre Foundation. What about if they're curious about you and what you're up to? Where would you direct people for more info there?
So I do have a personal website. It's amandabcunningham.com. On social media, I have a nice balance in my life of Her Future, of yoga medicine, Seva. I'm a yoga medicine teacher. I would love to connect with anyone and everyone about all of these issues, and or just about yoga. And it's so often that we also underestimate just like a brainstorming session. Like, you just have to be like, hey, I'm interested, but I have no clue where to start. And just like jumping on a Zoom with me and that person, like, we both learn and we both grow and we both expand. And, please reach out, even if you don't even know what you want to say, and let's see where it goes.
I love that. Thank you so much for your time today and for sharing with us the benefit of your experience. Hopefully that has inspired everybody to go out and do a little something. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Thank you, Rachel and Yoga Medicine. I love you guys.
Thanks for listening to Yoga Medicine. If you liked the show, be sure to subscribe and leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you got something out of this episode, please spread the word and share it with a friend. You can find more information, articles, trainings, and classes at yogamedicine.com. Check us out on social media as Yoga Medicine, or you can email us at info@yogamedicine.com. Thank you for being part of our Yoga Medicine community.
The content of this podcast is not medical advice and is not meant to replace medical care. Please consult your healthcare provider to determine what is best for your unique healthcare needs.